Well, it didn't take long, did it? For the second day in a row, we are back with another Championship Manager special. They all seem to be coming in twos this summer, and this is one that had been rumoured for about a week or so. And after a long time on gardening leave, Marti Cifuentes has been let go by QPR and replaced this morning by new head coach Julien Stéphan. Now, we're going to talk about the new man and the old man, as we always do in these manager specials, reflect on recent seasons at QPR and where the new man can hopefully look to improve his new side. So before we go and talk about Julien Stéphan and QPR for next season, let's have a little look back at Marti Cifuentes and his spell in charge. Of course, you can say it ended on a little bit of a sour note with him reportedly looking at other jobs in the Championship and being placed on gardening leave and eventually let go. But it's hard to forget the impact that he had, particularly in his first season, the 23-24 campaign, when he joined at the end of October, because much like Danny Rowell at Sheffield Wednesday, they sort of got grouped together during that season. They both joined in very difficult positions after their clubs had had terrible starts. And much like Sheffield Wednesday, QPR flew away from the relegation zone and got themselves out of trouble by the end of the season from a very difficult starting point. So Marti Cifuentes immediately endeared himself to the QPR fans. And last season, while I think it's fair to say they were patchy, they were defensively leaky at times. And although they only finished 7 points clear of the relegation zone in 15th, and Cifuentes obviously was placed on leave just before the end of it, they were never really under massive threat. They started pretty slowly, but after that, they picked up and they were pretty comfortable for the most part for the second 2/3 of the season. So I don't think there's much that can be said negatively about Marti Cifuentes, other than maybe a little bit of inconsistency and patchiness to his team. But there was no doubt for QPR that the big problem through most of his spell in charge was converting chances, which is a very similar story to the manager special we did with Middlesbrough yesterday. I think it speaks volumes that even after the end of the season, the disagreements with the CEO and the reports of discussing other jobs, when it was announced that he was leaving yesterday and he put out his statement, it was overwhelmingly positive, the response from QPR fans in thanking him for what he had done. And he was a popular manager there. The side were playing good football for the most part. They just didn't have that finishing touch. And look, it's a squad that is pretty solid, but is lacking in certain places. And unfortunately for them, in front of goal is one of those. He's dealt with huge injury crisis at times while he's been at the club and difficulty in recruitment. But he's done a good job. He's kept them comfortable in the Championship. And when he took over in that first season, that didn't look like it was going to be an easy feat. So a massive well done to Marti Cifuentes. He leaves a popular man at QPR still, but he is replaced now by a new head coach, and that is what we have to move on to. Let's have a look at the statement, because QPR are delighted to confirm Julien Stéphan as the club's new head coach. The 44-year-old previously worked in the French top flight with Rennes and Strasbourg. Rennes, of course, his boyhood club. He guided them to their first trophy in nearly half a century in 2019 when he beat PSG on penalties in the Coupe de France. Then also finished in the Champions League places, their highest ever position during the 1920 campaign that was restarted due to COVID. Under the Frenchman, Strasbourg finished 6th in the 21-22 season, their highest position for over 40 years. What they don't know mention in the statement is that during his second season at Strasbourg, he was sacked with the club having won 1 in 17 games at the start of the season in the relegation places. And similarly at Rennes, when he went back for his second spell, did very well the first season, and then in the second campaign started slowly and was let go. So that's maybe a concern for later down the line. But initially, you have to look at his achievements and say he's done very good jobs with sides that would perhaps be considered underdogs at times, or in Strasbourg's case, had a lot going on off the pitch. But now he's moved to English football, something he seems very excited about looking at his statement there. And also the club very happy to have him. It seems like he was identified as the man pretty early on. And he's talked about his style of play as well, a team playing with intensity, energy and personality. And I think that's something that's quite important. It's perhaps a mistake QPR made a few years ago. They went for a club legend in Gareth Ainsworth, but while it was an appointment that could have been right at a different time, it was a very different style to what they'd been playing in recent seasons. We talked about it at that year, going from Mark Warburton and changing styles and ending up then through Mick Beale, through Neil Critchley, through Gareth Ainsworth, and ending up with this complete mishmash of footballing styles that you're never going to be able to gel that quickly. This one feels like a more steady, continuous flow, a very similar style of coach to Marti Cifuentes, maybe a little bit more aggressive in their leaning towards attack, is what I would say from seeing Rennes and Strasbourg. but definitely more of a similar style and a little more continuity at the club rather than just sort of mix and matching between different footballing philosophies. So that's something immediately that rings less alarm bells than previous QPR manager specials we've done. But let's talk about Julien Stephan and where he's going to have to improve QPR. Because if we look at last season, QPR finished 15th, scored 53 goals in a pretty low scoring championship, but to be honest, not up there with the records of the top six. Conceded 63, which is one of the worst records in the league. It's about the sixth or seventh worst. So they are a club that definitely do need to improve in both boxes. And I feel like it's a bit repetitive from yesterday's, but the problems that Middlesbrough and QPR have are very similar, just at slightly different stages in their development and with slightly different levels of squad at the moment. We mentioned it last year when they were losing attacking players and perhaps not replacing him directly, that we thought this was going to be an issue in front of goal for them. They have got good defensive players at the club, but going forward, there is just a little bit of a lack of a goal threat. They've got a player in Michael Frey who on his day is unplayable, but that day isn't often enough, and he has had a few injury problems as well. And then they've got a lot of creative talent in the team and the squad too, and a bit of experience at the back. But have they got enough in terms of dynamism at the back, in terms of pace, and also in terms of a goal scorer to really threaten for those playoff places? Because we've talked about it before. There are so many managers coming into the championship this summer who have got no or very little championship experience. A lot of clubs are gambling. And I think we're going to see a year where there are a lot of surprises in terms of teams over and underperforming. And QPR last season is very clear to see where their problems were. If we take away the overall record, away from home, they're actually the sixth strongest side in the division last year. Their away form would have had them in the playoffs, albeit it was a weak championship with only 7 wins on the road. But still, they had a decent defensive record. They were rock solid for the most part. And they managed to pick up 27 points, which was the 6th best in the league. At home, at Loftus Road, a very different story. The 4th worst home record in the division, one of only 4 sides to pick up less than 30 points at home. And to give you a little bit of perspective onto that, we see teams that were relegated in Luton and Plymouth both picked up more points at home than QPR. QPR letting 34 goals at home this season, only worsened by Plymouth Argyle and matched by Norwich City, who had some bonkers scorelines defensively. So defensively at home, where QPR are trying to be the aggressors, trying to create chances, not taking them, they're then being hit on the break as well. And maybe that is a little bit of those aging legs at the back. We've talked about Steve Cook. Jimmy Dunn obviously is a stalwart of the club, but there's a lot of experience there. There's maybe not that outright pace to play that high pressing style, that high intensity style that both Marti Cifuentes and now Julien Stephan would want to do. So I do think there's going to need to be a little bit of recruitment on that front, but it's very clear coming in where QPR have got to improve. And if they can keep some sort of consistency in their away form and improve at home and find a way to score goals and pick up points, they're going to be a force next season. Because look, it was a tight championship. They're 12 points off the playoff positions, and they can be in a push if they just pick up 3 or 4 more home wins. It's easier said than done, but with very clear evidence of where they can improve, maybe that is a job for Julien Stephan. And if you go and look at his record, we then get the answers as to where that might happen. Now, there are, of course, some negatives with the Julien Stephan appointment. He is another head coach appointment this summer with no championship manager experience, no English football management experience. But then, is that the worst summer to do so when there are so many managers coming in that are in a similar boat? We talked about it yesterday. Rob Edwards is considered an experienced championship manager by this summer standards. He's only just got over a season's worth of games under his belt at championship level. It's a very strange situation. Liam Manning's probably the only exception in the whole summer so far for people who have got extensive experience of, in many cases, English football, but in almost every case, championship football specifically. And we know it's a very unique league. But one of the things I was interested in with Julien Stephan is the goal output. If you go and look at his last season at Rennes, which he managed most of from the 23-24 campaign, I know he managed the start of last season, but in that campaign, Rennes finished the joint 3rd highest scorers in the Ligue 1. So they're definitely able to produce a goal threat. They were an aggressive side. They were an attacking side. He's always had goals in his team. His sides have averaged about a goal and a half a game, but they do concede plenty as well. At Strasbourg, even when they had their excellent campaign, they were reliant, a bit like Nottingham Forest last year, on a number of brilliant defensive and goalkeeping displays from Matt Sells. who was magnificent for them then to earn that Forest move. However, there is no doubt that Julien Stéphan's sides are geared towards attack. They create chances, they score goals, and they're not afraid of letting a few in at the other end. So that goal record defensively of 63 conceded, I maybe don't see improving that much, particularly with the current personnel trying to fit his style. However, I do think we're going to see attacking additions or adaptations to style that will allow them to score goals, because there is no doubt he's managed to achieve that at every club. The other caveat I would say is that most of his career and most of his success, bar that one season at Strasbourg, the second one was a bit of a disaster, has been at his boyhood club where he's been comfortable, where he's been sort of nurtured through the B team and then became very popular instantly in the first team by winning a cup. After that, has he been able to go and succeed consistently elsewhere? Well, his CV hasn't given him the chance to do that, but the one time he has, it's been mixed. It was a very good first season followed by a disastrous second. And that would probably be my worry looking to the future with QPR. If he can get his players in, if he's able to create a side that scores goals, I do fancy QPR to have a solid season, be entertaining to watch, and maybe find a bit more of a ruthless streak in front of goal. But I do then worry about season 2 and 3 based on his previous record. Is he going to be able to consistently deliver for the long term? We've seen it with a lot of managers, probably Jurgen Klopp's an exception, but a lot of managers that come in and play high intensity football at any level, they have a great first season, but then the message just starts to drift. The players just start to run out of steam. And when the results start to go, if you feel yourself drained of energy, it can become quite difficult. I saw it myself with Luton Town, with Rob Edwards, as he tried to do that last year. So there are going to be some challenges along the road, but I don't think QPR are a million miles away. They've got some good young players coming through. They've got a real wealth of experience in certain positions through the core of the team. We've talked about the two experienced boys at the back. You've got Sam Field, who just signed a new contract, really quality player in central midfield, creative sparks such as Ilias Chair, and then Frey, who on his day can be a handful. There's a lot of quality in places in that side. And actually, one of the positives I would give for QPR is they've got a pretty good spine of the team. It's just around it that they've got to build. And that's an easier thing to do than vice versa. So I don't think it's a lost cause for QPR. They do desperately need a consistent goal scorer. And I do think they need to improve a little bit, particularly in defensive areas and probably the wide positions as a priority. I do think that QPR are going to have to sign a few if they're going to make Julien Stéphan style work. But if he can help improve that home form, if he can get players that will put the ball in the back of the net and stop them being so susceptible to the counter, which I'm more worried about looking at his defensive form in recent seasons, I do think QPR will have another solid campaign. They've clearly been building towards a slightly different style over the last couple of years. And it did start to feel like a bit like under Mark Warburton, where they gradually improved and pushed themselves nearer the top end of the table, and probably would have made the playoffs in his final season if it wasn't for that disastrous injury crisis at the end. I did feel like they were heading that way with Marti Cifuentes, albeit with slightly slower progress. With the right signings this summer, I think the same could happen again. I don't think it's the worst appointment in the world. We do normally ask a couple of questions before we end these episodes though. How will QPR get on next year as a prediction? And do we think the new manager sees out his contract? Now, there have been a few rumours about it, but the formal statement from QPR doesn't mention a contract length. I do think that he's going to be given time, and it's one credit I have to give to QPR, much like Borough yesterday in that manager special. They are a side that traditionally, with Mark Warburton, with Marti Cifuentes, once they're settled with a manager, they will give them time to improve and to build their footballing team on the pitch. So QPR are not one of those clubs, unless they have a disastrous time, that will then go and panic very quickly, which of course they did a couple of times with the Critchley and Ainsworth situation a couple of years ago. However, I do think Julien Stéphan has the potential to be a very good appointment. There's always that slight question mark over what's going to happen with the move into English football, with him moving outside of his comfort zone for just the second time in his career, really, away from his boyhood club. He's not a manager with a wealth of experience that's gone and worked with hundreds of people, but he is a very good coach with a good CV. And the one thing we know we're going to get is attacking football. Perhaps not to the cavalier extent with the Tim Walter Hull one a year or so ago. I think he'll have a little bit more discipline and a little bit more success than him. I don't think I can say off the bat that QPR make the playoffs, as I don't think the squad wholly suits his style at the moment. But if they can get the right additions in, I'm looking at fullbacks and up front. I do think they've got a chance next year. So we'll keep a very close eye on a transfer window for QPR. I do think it will be another mid-table finish, but I think it will be a better one. I think they'll continue to improve, become more solid, more consistent. And I think perhaps next season, the aim is to improve the home form, to score more goals and edge towards that top half of the table, where perhaps then next season, in his second year, they can then look at the playoffs. Will QPR be able to do that? Will the recruitment aid him? And will he be a success at Loftus Road? It doesn't really matter what I think, does it? QPR fans, are you excited by the appointment of Julien Stephan? How sad were you to see Marti Cifuentes go? Let us know the answer to both in the comments down below. If you're another Championship fan, do you think QPR might be dark horses next year with a manager who's proven to have a very good first season at most clubs he's joined? Let us know what you think about that and all the other manager specials this summer, which you can find up in the eye above. Hopefully we're going to get a little break from them now, but not for too long, because we will be back in around a month's time for our pre-season predictions. All of the EFL leagues and National League will predict the relegation, promotion and the playoffs as well. And of course, our staple diet on this channel is the Championship Prediction Show. We will have score predictions for every single match week in a 25-26 campaign, and you've got a better chance than ever to beat me now, because with Luton Town down in League One, I'm not going to be watching as much live Championship football. That'll be every match week once the season commences, so subscribe and turn that notification bell on to stay up to date with those. If you enjoyed this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on the video, and I'll see you next time, hopefully after the fixtures have been announced tomorrow, with more Championship news or manager specials.